Daisy Coleman, a young beauty from Missouri, seemed to have everything necessary for happiness: a compassionate soul, a sharp mind, and numerous talents. However, behind her attractive appearance hid a deep inner trauma caused by horrific events the girl experienced at an early age. Daisy was born on March 30, 1997, in the small town of Albany, to the family of Michael Coleman, a doctor, and his wife Melinda, who worked as a veterinarian. The girl was the second of 4 children and had 3 brothers. Tragedy struck the Coleman family in 2009 when Daisy's father and one of her younger brothers got into a car accident on their way to a wrestling competition in a neighboring town. Their car veered off the road and flipped over, resulting in the death of the head of the family on the spot. After this, Melinda and the children moved to the larger city of Maryville, where the mother had to raise 3 sons and a daughter on her own. Despite the difficulties, the woman bravely coped with the challenges of fate. No one in the family, who had already suffered one terrible loss, could have imagined the misfortune that awaited them ahead. The morning of January 8, 2012, was freezing, with the temperature dropping to 0. It was then that 14-year-old Daisy Coleman came to her senses in the yard of her own house, lying in the snow with her hair frozen to the ground. The girl was wearing only a t-shirt and sweatpants. The first thought that flashed through her clouded mind was, "Am I dead?" Daisy could neither get up nor call for help, she could only cry silently. By some miracle, the girl managed to crawl to the front door and knock on it with her last strength. The clock showed 5 in the morning. Fortunately, Melinda, who was sleeping in her room, woke up from the knock. At first, the woman thought it was the whimpering of freezing dogs wanting to get into the house. Throwing on a robe, she headed for the door to let them into the warmth, but on the threshold, she saw her daughter, who was almost unconscious, lying on the cold steps. Daisy reeked of alcohol and could not utter a word. Melinda screamed, calling for her sons. The boys instantly ran downstairs and brought their numb sister inside. The whole family was frightened and bewildered. At first, they tried to warm the girl with blankets, but the mother, carefully examining Daisy, suspected serious frostbite on her legs. Then she filled the bathtub with water and ordered her sons to take their sister to the bathroom. Leaving the unconscious girl there, the boys left, and Melinda undressed her daughter herself. The woman went cold with horror when she saw huge bruises and crimson spots on Daisy's body. Only then did it dawn on her that something terrible had happened to her child. Placing her daughter in a tub of cool water, the woman slowly increased the temperature, warming the girl's body. Her experience as a veterinarian told her how to act in cases of frostbite. Fortunately, Daisy's condition improved, but she still could not speak coherently. Melinda, seriously alarmed, called the police. Officers examined the girl, but her alcohol-clouded mind did not allow Daisy to shed light on the events of the previous night. They had to listen to Paige, Daisy's friend, who was staying overnight at the Coleman's house in the girl's room that night. And this is what she told them. On Saturday, January 7, 2019, Daisy invited her best friend Paige for a sleepover. In the evening, the girls watched horror movies and sipped alcohol, which they had secretly stolen from the Coleman's home bar. Closer to night, Daisy started texting with Matthew Barnett, a 17-year-old friend of her older brother and a popular player on the school football team. Learning that the girlfriends were bored, Matthew sent them a message: "Hey girls, want to have some fun at my place?" Daisy and Paige, delighted with the offer, agreed without hesitation to meet him and his friends. On January 8, around 1 in the morning, they crawled out of the window of Daisy's bedroom and ran around the corner of the house, where Matthew and 4 of his buddies were waiting for them. The boys took the girls to the Barnett residence, helped them crawl through the window into the basement, and warned them to be quiet so as not to wake Matthew's parents, who were sleeping upstairs. According to Paige, as soon as they found themselves in the basement, Matthew began pouring Daisy drink after drink. Paige just watched as her friend drank non-stop. At some point, one of Matthew's friends, Nicholas, approached Paige, took her by the hand, and led her to an adjacent empty room in the basement, where contact occurred between them at his initiative. Meanwhile, Matthew and Daisy disappeared into another room where there was a wide bed. Several times, Paige noticed through the open door what was happening there. Daisy, almost unconscious, was lying on the bed, unable to move or say a word. Matthew took advantage of her helplessness and had sexual intercourse with her. And his friend Jordan filmed it all on his phone camera. Around 2 in the morning, the group began to disperse. The boys put the girls in the car and drove them to the Coleman's house. Paige got out first, and Matthew told her that Daisy needed to sit in the cold to sober up. He assured that they would stay with her outside and sent Paige to bed. Believing the boys, she went into the house alone, climbed through the bedroom window, and instantly fell asleep in her friend's bed. At the same time, Matthew and his friends dragged Daisy out of the car. The girl was nauseous, so they took off her shoes, took her purse and phone. While Daisy was vomiting, the boys held her hair. Then they carefully laid the girl on the frozen ground near the house and quickly drove away, afraid that someone would notice them. The defenseless Daisy lay in the snow for about 3 hours in light clothing, a t-shirt and sweatpants. She had no shoes or socks, and her wet hair was frozen to the ground. The police officers who arrived at the call thoroughly inspected the house and yard. In Daisy's room, they found 5 empty bottles of alcohol, and outside, the girl's purse, her cell phone, shoes, and traces of vomit. That same morning, Daisy was taken to the hospital, where doctors found numerous bruises on her legs and signs. Tests showed that the girl's blood alcohol level was almost twice the legal limit. After a few hours in the hospital, Daisy regained consciousness but could not remember or explain anything, admitting only that she had drunk too much. She did not hide the fact that she had taken alcohol from the home bar without her mother's permission and secretly ran away at night to the boys. At 11 a.m. on January 8, law enforcement officers found Matthew Barnett, Jordan Zek, and Nicholas Gramutis, charged them, and took them to the station for interrogation. Matthew did not deny the fact of Daisy Coleman that night but insisted on the voluntary nature of the act. According to him, the girls were already tipsy at the time of the meeting. At first, Barnett denied treating Daisy to alcohol, but the more he spoke, the more he got confused in his own testimony. Eventually, the boy admitted that he had raised the girl's alcohol level to melt her icy heart. Matthew claimed that he used a condom, which he got rid of on the way when he was driving Daisy home. Jordan initially refused to testify but then reported that he had filmed Matthew kissing Daisy on Nicholas' phone. The video lasted about 10 seconds, managed to circulate in the company, but was quickly destroyed by the frightened cameraman. Nicholas, who had been intimate with Daisy's friend Paige, was the only one who immediately fully admitted his guilt. He was sent to a juvenile correctional facility. Matthew's friend, in whose car the young men were driving the girls around, said that during the ride, Daisy was crying incessantly, and Barnett expressed fears that the girl's brother Charlie would kill him if he found out what had happened. Meanwhile, information surfaced that a couple of days before the incident, Matthew Barnett had been invited to dinner at the Coleman's house, where he peacefully dined with the family at the same table. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon on January 8, a search was conducted in the basement of the Barnett residence. The police seized bedding, several empty bottles, men's underwear, and disposable cups. During repeated interrogations, Sheriff's Deputy Roxanne White, talking to Matthew, doubted the truthfulness of his testimony. At one point, she even suggested that the girls might have provoked the boys with their behavior, seeking to attract attention to themselves. The officer praised Barnett for taking care of Daisy and driving her home, somehow not attaching importance to the fact that he later left her to freeze on the street. Several days passed. Daisy Coleman fully recovered, and her life was no longer in danger. However, the girl still could not remember anything new about the events of that fateful night. 2 months later, in March 2012, all charges against Matthew Barnett and Jordan Zek were dropped. The district attorney concluded that sexual intercourse between the young men occurred by mutual consent. The scandalous video shot by Jordan was never recovered, although several classmates claimed to have seen the recording of Matthew kissing Daisy. Examination of text messages on the couple's phones showed that they communicated about once a month. In the correspondence, Coleman hinted to Barnett that she was ready to sleep with him in exchange for a bottle of hard liquor. Their correspondence on the eve of January 8, full of crude hints and obscenities, was also discovered. After Matthew's release, it turned out that he was the grandson of Rex Barnett, an influential politician and former member of the state legislature. Rex Barnett was a member of the Committee on Criminal Justice and Public Safety, so he was well acquainted with many prosecutors and police officers in Missouri. Matthew and Jordan were released, and they returned to their usual lives. Meanwhile, Daisy Coleman hoped that the hype surrounding her nighttime adventure would subside. She continued to go to school, but instead of support from her peers, she faced outright hostility and bullying. Most of her acquaintances sided with Matthew, and Daisy was called a whore and a slut. The girl instantly turned into an outcast, withdrew into herself, and tried to spend as much time alone as possible. Coleman, who had previously led an active social life, played sports, and danced, now became invisible. She had to leave the school cheerleading team. Daisy's mother, Melinda, received anonymous threats at home and work every day. Soon, the woman, who had worked at a veterinary clinic for many years, was asked to resign. After that, the Coleman family decided they could no longer stay in Maryville and moved to another town. In the spring of 2013, their empty house, put up for sale, burned to the ground. The police could not determine the cause of the fire, but rumors spread through the town that Matthew Barnett's father was involved in the arson. Some time later, under extremely mysterious circumstances, the house of Paige, Daisy's friend, also burned down. By that time, the girls had already stopped communicating. By the way, Paige also became an outcast at school and suffered from nightmares for a long time. Time passed, and Daisy's story got into the media. The girl began to receive active support from people all over the country who had experienced similar ordeals. Coleman managed to get the case against her main offender, Matthew Barnett, reopened. A trial was held, but the young man was found guilty only of leaving Daisy alone in the cold at night. Barnett was sentenced to 2 years of probation and ordered to pay the Coleman family $1,800 in compensation. No charges were brought against the other persons involved in the case. Daisy Coleman continued to live her life, regularly receiving not only words of support on the internet but also threats from anonymous users. She understood how unfairly people had treated her. The girl took every negative comment about her very painfully. In 2016, when 19-year-old Daisy was in college, the documentary Audrie and Daisy was released on Netflix, dedicated to the problems of bullying and harassment on social networks, as well as their tragic consequences. Coleman became one of the main characters of the film and told her own story. But the fate of the second heroine of the film, a girl named Audrie from California, turned out to be even harder. Almost the same thing happened to Audrie as to Daisy in 2012, but she could not survive it either physically or morally. The girl's photos spread through the network at a frantic speed and caught the eyes of her friends and foes. Audrie's last message on social media was a cry of despair: "My life is ruined. The whole school knows about everything. I will never get rid of this shameful reputation. Everyone around considers me scum. I just want it to end finally." 9 days later, the girl committed suicide, unable to withstand the humiliation that crashed down on her from all sides. Audrie's parents managed to get a criminal case initiated only 6 months after their daughter's death. 3 guilty boys were sentenced to 30 to 45 days in prison. Later, their families paid the girls' parents about $1 million in moral compensation. Let's return to Daisy Coleman. In 2018, she decided to start life from scratch and moved to Colorado, where she got a job in a tattoo parlor. At the same time, the girl was working on a documentary project dedicated to her recovery and rehabilitation. But in June 2018, Daisy was in for a new blow of fate. Melinda, the girl's mother, together with her brother Tristan, got into a car accident on the way to Colorado. The 19-year-old young man died on the spot. The circumstances of that accident still remain unclear. On social media, Daisy admitted that after the tragedy, it became increasingly difficult for her to restrain her inner demons, put on a smile, and pretend that everything was fine. After her brother's death, Coleman became a co-founder of a charitable organization designed to help victims. The girl continued to share her own tragedy and support people with a similar fate. In her posts, Daisy repeatedly admitted how difficult it was for her to fight the emotional pain, panic attacks, and constant terrifying memories. In the summer of 2020, 23-year-old Daisy complained to her friends that she was being stalked by an unknown man who regularly sent her threats. Back in December 2019, the girl had turned to the police about this, written statements about the surveillance, begged for help, but all her pleas remained unanswered. On August 4, 2020, Coleman wrote on Twitter that she was afraid to leave the house, could not walk the dog or go to work. According to her, she had completely stopped eating and sleeping. A few hours later, a new post by Daisy appeared on Facebook. The girl reported that some man had approached her house and knocked on the door. Coleman wrote that she was very frightened because she assumed that earlier he could have stolen her keys, and now he could easily get inside without any problems. Daisy also claimed that the stranger had stolen her photo, registered on one of the sites, and was now offering services for money on her behalf. After reading these messages, Melinda, the girl's mother, called the Colorado police and asked them to urgently check on her daughter. At 4 p.m., law enforcement officers arrived at the call. Daisy let them into the house, where they stayed for about an hour. The girl again told them that she was being stalked by an unknown man. The officers did not notice anything strange or suspicious in her behavior. But shortly after the police left, 23-year-old Daisy Coleman called her boyfriend via video. Just during the conversation, she took out a pistol, put it to her temple, and pulled the trigger. The confused young man did not even fully realize what had happened at first. The connection was lost, the girl stopped answering calls. The frightened boyfriend dialed 911. When the police officers reappeared at the Coleman house at 8 p.m., they found Daisy already dead. Melinda made the news of her daughter's death public on social media. "She was my best friend, a wonderful daughter," the woman wrote. "How I wish I could take all her pain upon myself." Daisy never managed to recover from what a gang of young men did to her at school. "It's terribly unfair. My baby girl is gone from us forever." According to her mother, she had fought for years for her daughter's physical and mental health, doing everything in her power. The woman admitted that in recent months, Daisy had indeed been stalked. And shortly before her death, the girl found out that she would never be able to have children. After Daisy's death, the tattoo parlor where she worked was robbed. The perpetrator took out an album with exclusive sketches and the girl's tattoo machine. 4 months passed. In December 2020, 58-year-old Melinda Coleman wrote another poignant post on social media dedicated to her beloved daughter. And then she took a gun in her hands and did the same as Daisy. Only 2 sons remained in the Coleman family, the elder Charlie and the younger Logan. The charitable foundation established by Daisy organized a fundraiser to support the boys who were suddenly orphaned. It is known that Matthew Barnett, despite everything, quite successfully arranged his life and career. After the death of Daisy and her mother, the man publicly expressed his condolences to the Coleman family. Thank you for watching this story. Write your thoughts about it in the comments. Don't miss the future videos, subscribe and like the channel. Take care of yourself and people you love.